Hello everybody, today we are talking about maximum occupancy in New York City apartments. Okay, this is a topic that's really important for tenants and landlords and is not as simple as you might think. So stay tuned and we'll get right into it right after the intro. All right, everybody, welcome to the channel. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. I'm Daniel Ackerman. I'm a real estate agent with Keller Williams in New York City, bringing valuable information to home buyers, sellers, landlords, investors, and tenants in New York City and beyond. And today, we are talking about a topic that is really important for tenants and landlords to understand well, and that is how many occupants can live in an apartment at any one time. Really important for landlords to understand because oftentimes I've seen landlords have clauses in their leases that are not quite, kosher, and then you can get yourself into trouble as a landlord with that. And I've also seen questions from tenants where they get a little bit confused by this issue. So really, really important to understand. I'm going to be reading off some notes today, so if I'm looking away, that's what I'm doing. Now, the question of how many occupants can live in an apartment in New York City gets a little complicated because it's addressed by different sections of the law. This is really important for me to say. I am not an attorney, okay, and I'm not qualified to give legal advice. I'm sharing with you my understanding of the laws that exist that I'm aware of, but I'm not an attorney. So if you really want to get this information nailed down, I encourage you to do your own research and definitely speak with an attorney who specializes in tenant landlord law, who can give you definitive answers on these questions. But let me just share with you my understanding of what's out there, okay? We have several sections of the law that address the issue of how many people can live in a given apartment. The first one is called the roommate law, okay? And this is in New York Real Property Law 235F, okay? And that's called the roommate law. And it says basically this: a residential lease entered into by one tenant implicitly permits that the tenant can share the apartment with their immediate family and or unrelated persons for reasons of economy, safety, and companionship. Now, that's not verbatim what it says. This is a summary that I'm reading off of my notes. But basically, what it means is if there's only one tenant on the lease, that tenant's immediate family, or their parents basically, plus one additional occupant, and the dependent children of that unrelated party can live in the apartment. Let's think about if two people can sign a lease. According to 235F, if you take into account immediate family for both lease signers, unrelated occupants, and dependent children, you could be looking at 9 or 10 people because you have 2 people on the lease, their parents, so that's an additional 4 people. Now you're up to 6. Unrelated occupant, that's 7, and their dependent children, which could be 1, 2, or 3 people. You're looking at 8, 9, 10 people possibly for a 1-bedroom apartment, maybe with 2 people on the lease. Now, it gets a little bit more complicated than that because in the same real property law, 235F, subsection 3 and 4, it states that the number of occupants in an apartment, i.e. those who are not named in the lease, should not exceed the number of tenants. So basically, if there is one tenant on the lease, then the number of additional occupants that live in the apartment should not exceed that one, so basically 2. And if there are 2 people on the lease, then the maximum number of occupants that should be living in the apartment is 4, because you have the 2 from the lease plus 2, right? And according to this section of the law, it seems that it would be impermissible to have 3 people because that exceeds the amount of people that are on the original. So it gets a little bit more complicated, but we're still not done because it gets even more complicated than that. Here's where it gets really interesting, because now we look at a different section of the law. We're looking now at Real Property Law, Housing Maintenance Code. So we're looking at Housing Maintenance Code. Before we were looking at Real Property Law, now we're looking at Housing Maintenance Code. Section 27-2075 says every person in an apartment or a 1 or 2 family home must have a livable area of no less than 80 square feet. Okay, so let's do some math. In a 500 square foot one-bedroom apartment, which is pretty, standard, pretty common for a one-bedroom rental apartment in New York City, would be 500 square feet. Sometimes they can be smaller for sure. We divide that by 80, and you get six and a quarter people. So you're going to round down to 6 people. So the maximum number of people who are legally allowed to occupy an apartment of 500 square feet is 6. Okay. Now, if we look back to the previous example, 235F subsections 3 and 4, we were seeing 4 because you have 2 lease signers plus no more than 2 additional people because it's the same amount as what's on the lease. So you have 4 or you have 6. Which one takes precedence? It's a good question, probably a great question for an attorney. My guess is that it's going to be the smaller number. You're going to be limited to the smaller number, so that's 4. But let's say it was a smaller apartment. Let's say we have a 300 square foot apartment and we divide that by 80 square feet. This would be a very, very small one-bedroom apartment or a studio. Then we get 3.75 people. So, well, you're not going to have 3/4 of a person. So we're looking at 3 people, basically. Now, the previous section said 4 if there's 2 lease signers. This section, because it's related to square footage, says 3. So in this case, I would probably say that you're limited by the square footage more than how many people are on the lease. Okay? So, clearly these things get a little bit complicated. Okay? What exactly does a landlord have a right to know? So in the instance of an increase in the amount of inhabitants or occupants in an apartment, the tenant needs to notify the landlord within 30 days. And the landlord can't say no to my understanding, a landlord can't say no as long as it is legal according to the things that we've talked about. So you'll probably want to talk to a tenant attorney or check with a qualified professional and see if you actually can legally bring in another person based on space or the terms, based on the other sections of the law. Now, landlords, if you are a landlord, you cannot limit people from having a significant other move in or family move in if it's legal according to New York City Code. Again, get legal advice from a landlord attorney. And if you need a recommendation, I have several landlord attorneys that I can recommend, but you definitely want to get some guidance on this because the last thing you want to do is land in court because your restrictions weren't legal. Okay, so you protect yourself, make sure you don't get yourself in any trouble regarding fair housing rules and things like that, and make sure that the clauses that you're putting in your leases and the rules that you are putting on your tenants are actually legal, because you don't want to get in trouble. It's not worth the hassle. So guys, I hope that information was useful. Again, make sure you verify this information with a qualified tenant or landlord attorney. I can recommend some. Please get in touch with me if you have further questions or if you need a referral for an attorney. My contact information is in the description below. I'll also place some links to the pertinent sections of code that I discussed, the pertinent sections of law that I discussed in the description. If you found this information valuable, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to get more information like this, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell and you'll be notified of other videos when they get uploaded. And if you know somebody, maybe you don't need this information, but if you know somebody who could benefit from this information, make sure you share it with them. I'm always looking to grow this channel and help more people. So, hope you enjoyed the video. Come back again. And once again, I'm Daniel Ackerman, providing great real estate information for sellers, buyers, investors, landlords, and tenants. Thanks again for watching.